Welcome to week 5, English 11 students. I can't believe we're here already, halfway through the quarter. Weeks 1 through 3 closed, as you know, on Friday, but week 4 is still open. So if you didn't finish anything from last week, make sure you get it turned in so you get the credit for the assignments for last week still. That way you can still pass even if you got behind on weeks 1 through 3. We're going to be working on The Crucible this week. Thanks to those of you who came to watch the movie last Friday. I hope it gave you an indication or an idea, enough of the story to make it easier to read the play that we're going to read. We'll start reading it together on Tuesday in class at 11:30. So I hope you come to class. We'll read it together enough to understand what happens in the first act. I know we're short on time, so we'll do the best we can. That room gets very crowded, so make sure you come on time and that you get a seat, because I am going to shut the door once the seats are filled. And then you can just go home and read it on your own if you're late. If you're on time, I'll make sure that you have a seat. But if you're late, I'll lock the door and you won't. If there's no seats and you're late, you won't get to come in. Let's see. So we'll read that in class on Tuesday at 11:30. And then you'll be also reading Act 2 on your own and answering the questions at the end. I have that blocked out right now so you can't see it. I'm hoping to find time to work on it tonight to add some questions in addition to the close read, or as an alternative to the close read. I'm going to post some quotes and some questions for you to answer that are a little different than the close read questions. If you prefer to answer it that way, you get to choose which way you want to answer for that assignment. I want to see how you do on that, because in the past this has been a difficult reading for students, and so I'm working on ways to make it more understandable, like showing the movie and also changing the assignments a little bit, so it maybe will be easier for you. There's also an online discussion. Make sure you do that. I think you'll enjoy it. This play is not just about the Salem witch trials, but about the idea of witch trials, which is mob violence and hysteria acting out against citizens in it with unfounded or no evidence to the accusations. So you do hear that term, witch hunt, often, and it stems from these Salem witch trials where there was no evidence. There were no witches. We know that witches don't exist, but they believed it that back then. They believed that there were witches, that there were scary things that affected their lives in ways they couldn't explain. And so I want you to think about that before you start reading. I want you to think about that fear that they lived with, because they lived near woods that were dark and scary and unexplored. They didn't know what was beyond those woods. Remember, this was a new country to them. They hadn't explored beyond the woods. They didn't know what was there, what might come out and get them. They couldn't explain the deaths that occurred, the illnesses that struck them. There were many sudden and violent deaths. I think we talked about the skirt catching on fire as a woman's tending the fire to cook dinner. And that happened not uncommonly. Children dying of diseases, a really high mortality rate for infants. Infant mortality rate is what I was trying to say. So I want you to think about that, about this life of fear that they lived in, because they had so many challenges to conquer. Severe weather, really, really cold winters, and not enough food. They were hungry sometimes. And then they had this very strict religion that scared them too. If they didn't behave correctly, they were going to go to hell, as we read in The Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God last week. So that was another fear that they had to deal with, how to behave. And they had very strict rules for children and adults. For children to be, we talked about being seen and not speaking, that children were not to be playing very often. They were supposed to just sit and be mini adults. And that's not normal for children. They have a lot of energy to expound. So that was difficult for them. They had a lot of pent-up emotions because they weren't allowed to express them. So I want you to think about this living in fear. I'll tell you that it scares me to think about being lost in the ocean, for instance. Or I watched the movie Gravity with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney, and at the beginning, George Clooney cuts himself free because, oops, shoot, my outside light went out. Let me get over here and get it to turn on again. He cuts himself. Oh, that's a good spot to turn out, though. Dark and scary. So that's okay. He cuts himself free to just die in space. He's just going to drift off and die in space because it's the way that he knows that she maybe will be able to survive. And so I don't know if you saw that movie, but this idea of him just drifting out there in space alone was so scary to me, just the thought of that. So what is it that scares you about the unknown in that way? What is a deep, dark fear that you can talk about the unknown so that you can relate to the Puritans' fear at the time of the Salem witch trials? Write that down for your response, and you'll be done with your first assignment this week. Okay, I'm in the lab 8 to 2. If you need any help, please come see me. I'm there for you. I'm there to help you. And I hope you'll come ask me to help you with assignments when you get stuck on them, or just to answer any questions that you might have quickly. That's fine too. See you soon. Bye-bye.